Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoyed the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook?
Jesus, look at us. Not even know what we're doing. Who are we? What are we doing? Huh?
We're recording this on a Monday morning. You tell, folks. Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. And with me today on this lovely Monday morning is both Jamie and Pete. So we've got a full house today, including me, Mike. Full house today to talk about restricted operators licence. And who wants to kick this one off, gents?
Go on, Jamie.
Yeah, I'll kick this one off. So restricted operators. What's the difference between them and a standard, really?
That's the question, isn't it? That's kind of the question that when we were thinking about the subject for this podcast, that was kind of what we were discussing in the office, wasn't it, between us? You know, what is the difference? And I think a lot of people will point to the legislative difference when they say, almost put a fine in, a biscuit or a cake fine for this. Oh, you don't need a transport manager with a restricted operator's licence. I don't think that's true. What do you guys reckon?
Yeah, by name, perhaps. That's the only difference, isn't it?
By
Still
name,
need someone that can effectively manage the operation.
Yeah, I think, they absolutely need a transport manager. I don't even understand why we have restricted operators. Why even do we have restricted operators? Was it to make it more cost effective? Or, like, what? I don't really understand why we have restricted operators.
I think it's historic. I think it's historical. If you go back to the back end of the 1960s when we first saw that as part of the transport. I go back to the 1960s. Yeah, ask your granddads about it. Yeah. So at the back end of the 60s when we had the Transport Act, and that was the first time we saw an operator's licence in its current guise. And of course, at that point, we weren't talking about the EU. And of course, over time, we've inherited the EU piece, which is we're talking about standard licences, the standard national and the standard international, which require a transport manager and is a quite specific description of a transport manager and a criteria for a transport manager. But we're still left with this hangover, this restricted operator's licence. For those people who are operating vehicles carrying, essentially their own goods on their own account. So that's why we've got the legislation. I think, that's why we are where we are. But I mean, in today's world, is that really necessary?
Yeah, really I think the big challenge is that essentially a restricted operator can have no knowledge of transport regulation within their business, and ultimately they'll run their business because they're an own account operator. Their transport side of their business is a cost base, and naturally you're going to reduce that. As a business owner, you're going to look to reduce that or minimise or mitigate the costs as much as possible, which means cutting corners. So we've got a level of ignorance, we've got a level of apathy, and essentially we've just got this, essentially looking to run a business as profitably as possible, so therefore to mitigate costs wherever possible. And I think that's certainly in restricted operators. I see that as being sort of a fairly common case.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's the trainer in me can't help this, but yeah, if you look at the requirements for a restricted operator's licence, and you look at Section 13 of the Goods Vehicle Licensing of Operators Act 1995. Oh, really geek thing to know, but it's a trainer's thing, isn't it? That if you look at Section 13, it calls for satisfactory arrangements for. I'll paraphrase this. I've written it down here, but I'm going to paraphrase: driver's hours. Not to operate the vehicles overloaded and to keep the vehicles in a fit and serviceable condition. So it's kind of a requirement you do that. It just says there's no requirement for the restricted operator's licence to name a transport manager and then to detail the level of competence that transport manager needs. So that is definitely there. But you're right, Pete. What you're saying, if you sort of said, it's a cost base and we need to cover that cost base. and it's not going to be productive for us to employ a transport manager because they're not bringing anything to the table. So it tends to get sort of washed over, as it were, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting one as well, isn't it? It's you get set up with your restricted operator's licence, but where do you go for the information of what you need to do without that transport manager CPC or having a transport manager?
Even worse, isn't it? You've got zero
Yeah,
knowledge
No, exactly.
of what what's required.
I think I think that if you speak to the restricted operators who have been caught out by DVSA stops or have been for public inquiries, I think they would likely confirm that you do need a transport manager. But I think there's a real level of ignorance. I think within restricted operators, and I think if you're a restricted operator listening, I think our advice for you would be go and speak to a transport manager and get them to have a look at your business. At the very least, have a compliance audit done, which will be an educational process that will show you the shortfalls that you've got within your business.
It's amazing. We go to customers that are restricted operators and they don't know half the stuff that's required. Or they literally look at you in shock. What, we have to do that?
Yeah.
So it's really important to get someone to look at that.
Yeah, I mean it's right. I mean, without naming any names, we know people that are they manufacture things. They build and deliver things, but it's transport isn't their core of their business, is it? Transport is ancillary to their business, so therefore their expertise isn't in that area, is it? I think that's the problem.
No, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're a restricted operator's licence, listen, please do get in touch with Flagship Partners, because we'd love to help you, because actually we know that we can add so much value to your business based on the experience that we've got with our existing restricted operators, who we have several, and just to outline a situation with just one, and I'm sure Jamie's got examples that he can share of another, but to outline an example of one, and we would never share names because that's part of the confidential element of what we do. However, we have got an operator who I'd put a proposal in for us to support as a transport manager, and the company directors had winced a little bit at the cost of doing so, and they then had what I would class as a preventable bridge strike, which has cost an enormous amount of money, causing damage to the vehicle, causing a big insurance claim, loss of product that was on the back of the vehicle, and then the investigation process required following that, as well as the obvious letters to the traffic commissioner, etc. So about 4 weeks prior to the bridge strike incident, I'd submitted our proposal, and there'd been no real transport management of that business. They'd had an external transport manager that had been, I would say, looking after the fleet from arm's length, to put it bluntly, and they obviously suffered this incident, and on investigation there's been all sorts of interesting things that have come out of the woodwork as part of going through that process, and it's been a massive learning curve, and the public inquiry hasn't even taken place yet. That's going to be the next thing, but it really put the operator's licence at risk. And when you think about the cost of what we would do to prevent that from happening, well, the cost to the business of them losing their operator's licence and having to subcontract all of their deliveries is huge, is vast in comparison.
Lose control as well, aren't you? You're going to lose control of their deliveries to their customers.
Exactly, yeah, absolutely. There's going to be no just pop in here and pop in there to sort things out, is there?
Yeah, that's a great point, Jamie. And a lot of people see that by using their own fleet to deliver their own goods, they have that element of control, and they would lose that. Not to say that some not some fantastic hauliers out there that would do a good job, but not having that control is vital, I think, to some some restricted operators. But so there's this notion that nothing's going to happen to them because they haven't got a transport manager. A public inquiry, they will quickly find out that public inquiry is a very lonely place to be for somebody who has no knowledge of these kind of things. And I know, Jamie, you've had some recent experience with representing a client at public inquiry, and would that be somewhere you'd want to go with no knowledge?
Definitely not. No. Interestingly as well, we're working with a newish customer to us who I think will be ended up at a public inquiry, because he's not from the transport background. I don't think he quite understands the seriousness of it as well. So not understanding what can happen if you don't do the things,
Hi, it's Pete from Flagship Partners. We're really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. Flagship Partners offer a range of consultancy and training services to ensure that our customers remain compliant and have the best possible knowledge to be able to fulfill their work. If you're interested in support with any of our safety, HR or compliance services, or you want to train to be a transport manager or need driver CPC training, give us a call today. I was going to say that particular client, Jamie, like his attitude towards the whole incident that's led to him using us to go and look after the situation. Just talk us through that situation.
Yeah, so the client, his MOTs were out when he had a vehicle pulled over, no MOT on the vehicle or the trailer. I subsequently went last week to look at this operator, and his other truck was out of MOT. One PMI sheet that he could evidence, and when I was there, he was talking about, when this is all sorted, I'm going to put that trailer back on the road and get another truck on the road. So it's not understanding. Not understanding. You know, he's a nice guy and he doesn't want to be doing things wrong, but it's not having that understanding of what's required, what's expected. And I'm trying to get through to him. This isn't going to be an easy situation, what we're going to find ourselves in. It's going to go to a public inquiry. You've had a truck pulled over with no MOT, and the trailers have no MOT. It's definitely going to go to a public inquiry. And he's had a DVSA visit, which obviously threw up a lot of other things as well. But yeah, it's that lack of understanding. And you know, if he'd dealt with us probably 6 months ago, we could have got him on the straight and narrow before. But unfortunately, we're there to pick up the pieces. It's much better to get these things in place before.
Prevention is always better than the cure, isn't it? Yeah.
And that's the issue, is that if he loses that license, you know, he's going to end up having to subcontract that. You know,
his whole business relies
on
running them 2 trucks that he's got. Yeah.
And it's frightening. And actually, that particular case, it was quite interesting. When the phone call came through to me, it was the director had clearly blamed the driver and made it clear that it was the driver's fault, and that he thought that everything would be okay. And what's interesting with that is that sort of lack of understanding around the management systems. That's the expectations of the undertakings that people sign as part of their application. And I think increasingly the O licence application process, there are companies out there who are doing the O licence application process for restricted operators, but actually are they making clear to these restricted operators the actual undertakings that are on there when they're doing it, or are they just clicking through because they do so many and so regularly? Are they clicking through, or are they actually helping guide the directors, the company directors, through the process to be able to do that?
Element of it, we've done this, but you need to continue to do this, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to do, isn't there?
Yeah, there is absolutely, and I think it's just that lack of understanding that essentially you think that it's going to be the driver's fault that something's gone wrong. The driver didn't do what I told them to do. He didn't take that trailer that I expected him to take. But actually it's having that VOR system in place to go, actually that trailer's not got an MOT. It does not go out on the road. It cannot go out on the road. And as a director, you've allowed that to happen.
Well, yeah, interestingly, the driver was caught out having a card in as well. And the comment I got back was, what am I supposed to do? Check all the time. Yes, yes, exactly what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, having that, once again, keep going back to that word, understanding what's required, what needs to be done.
Yeah, and I think people listening will largely be enlightened to this anyway. They're going to be listening, going, "Oh, tell me something we don't know." But actually, by recording this, you've got something that you can share with restricted operators. Yeah. If you're looking to offer your services, you've got an asset here which you're able to share and educate them. Get them to have a listen.
It's education, isn't it? Yeah. People generally don't go out and do things wrong, but if they don't know, they can't do it right.
And as you say, so ignorance is no defence. I didn't know. I'm not a CPC holder. We're a restricted operator's licence. How was I to know? We've got 2 elements here. You've got and I always say this to people. You've got to remember we've got the law. So anything to do with construction and use, anything to do with the Road Traffic Act, we've got causing or permitting. So causing or permitting that driver to go out without a licence, that driver to go out without an MOT, causing or permitting, and then we've got the regulatory action that is taken by the traffic commissioner. And you've only got to look at, go onto the .gov if, anybody's sort of looking for evidence of this. Go onto the .gov website, or the Office of the Traffic Commissioner, decisions, and you'll see, quite a large number of these people appearing in front of the Traffic Commissioner are restricted licence holders.
Mm-hmm.
Half the time you've got to have a little sympathy with them because they don't know, but it's like, what you got to do? Check yes. That's exactly what you've got to do. Brilliant.
It is a tricky thing, isn't it? Because when I sort of compare and contrast to the health and safety legislation and my understanding of that and the level of ignorance around that as well, because the expectation is that you have this cultural learning of how things are done around here and how things should be, but to enable things to be done properly, there has to be that level of education. And I just want to challenge, whilst we're recording this and we're starting to think about these things, as an industry, are we doing enough to educate restricted operators? Are we doing enough to communicate with them and meet them at their level? Are we doing enough with the different trade organisations? A really good example is I know a fellow safety professional who was in part of the Glazing Federation, for example. Now, they'll have multiple restricted operators as part of that Glazing Federation, or we've just moved into Rose Group who happen to actually have standard national operator licenses, particularly for their builders merchant. Even though they don't really need one, they could get away with a restricted, but they wanted to have that ability and flexibility, and they've got a very good knowledge of their transport operation, and we also are also a client of ours, but they're part of a national buying group, which is a lot of the independents of builders merchants, for example, who will largely be restricted operators. Are we reaching out to them and educating their members around what's involved with O licensing? And I think it sort of begs the question that there's a real place for the education piece, I think, when we go to the different trade organisations.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a tick box exercise, and I always think bring it back to its lowest common denominator, which is road safety, which is what the purpose of the operator licence is all about, isn't it? It's about road safety. So I came down this morning, came down the A1, I only just a short drop down to the brand new offices, which are looking extremely good. And as I'm coming down to a row of traffic that's coming off at off the Stamford turn, everything's braking on the A1. I see a truck in my rear view mirror, and I'm hoping that driver is going to be properly qualified, that the driver is not going to be tired because they've been driving too many hours because they don't understand the rules. I'm hoping that the brakes on that vehicle are going to work reasonably well because it's been maintained properly, and basically it's not going to run into the back of me and wipe me out. I don't give a jot of what operator's licence is in the window. It could be any operator's licence in the window. I just want that vehicle to be safe, and I want that vehicle to stop. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It doesn't matter what operator's licence disc is in the window. You just want those, as a member of the public, another road user, you just want those things to be right, don't you? That's the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you lead into another great challenge around the restricted operator, is that if they've got no one in their business who is covering the regulation and managing the drivers effectively, they're going to run freaking riot.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh no, they're absolutely going to run the place in circles. And that's quite frightening, because actually many times the drivers will potentially have worked for standard national and international operators previously where they've been closely managed. And all of a sudden, when you have that culture of this culture shock of the expectations changed here. Actually, I can get home on Friday at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can get home on Friday at that time. Do you know what? No one's even going to know.
No one's going to know.
I'm just going to put my card out. No one's going to know. Yeah. Because sometimes a little bit of knowledge is actually almost more dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Almost more dangerous. And some drivers, I'm not saying all drivers, I'm not going to tar everyone with the same brush, but there's going to be plenty of drivers out there for restricted operators who are massively taking the piss.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think to bring that into it again, into a reflection that's someone with that knowledge can bring to a restricted operator, is we're going to save them money at the end of the day. We're going to operate the transport operation. The transport operation is going to be more efficient and hence save them money. So there's that. We can bring the compliance element and we can bring the safety element, but we can also bring the business acumen element to it as
Protecting
well.
the business name even.
Yeah.
It's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to say, protecting the brand. How much do these companies pay on marketing their business? Well, they can quickly ruin that overnight. The driver efficiency gains, the compliance gains, the overall productivity gains, essentially for a relatively small investment. Excuse me. And on that cough, I think we're going to tie this one up because I need a glass of water. Gents, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Hope you've enjoyed listening, and please do share it with your restricted operator friends. And if they have any queries, they're more than welcome to get in touch, and we'd be delighted to help them. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.